Bienvenue.
Good morning, everyone. We are receiving the Honourable Minister this morning. We are continuing with our work, and it's a pleasure to welcome the Minister for Canadian Heritage this morning, who will speak to us on her vision of official languages and on the two subjects that we're studying at the moment, the roadmap and the action plan. We'll be talking about immigration as well. The Minister is passionate about official languages. Welcome, Minister. Welcome to the committee. We will hear you for 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I hope that you're all in good shape, because I certainly am. And it'll be a pleasure to answer all your questions. Of course, before we begin, I'd like to introduce the two officials who are here with me, who work with me. They're experts in the field. And I believe they will also be able to meet with you and answer your questions after I leave. Hubert Lucier and Jean-Pierre Gauthier. Hubert is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Citizenship and Heritage and the Regions. Jean-Pierre is Director General for Official Languages. I will begin by saying once again how sincerely grateful I am, my deep and sincere appreciation for the work this committee has done, and for your continued proven commitment to strengthening and defending Canada's official languages. I follow with great care and interest the ongoing conversations you've been having on the roadmap and immigration in Francophone minority communities. I'm proud to be able to work closely with colleagues who share the same passion for Canada's official languages and heritage, and I look forward to our ongoing conversation on these and other important issues. English and French are at the heart of who we are. I myself am a proud Canadian, a proud Montrealer, and a proud Francophone who grew up with both official languages. They are part of my everyday life. I am a champion for official languages in Canadian society, and you can count on me to support the vitality of official language minority communities. Because our official languages are a strength and an asset for our future and have played a central role in our history. Our country's foundations were built on English and French, and it is in those languages that we have welcomed people from all backgrounds. Today, as Canadians, we participate in the political, democratic, and social life of our nation in English and French. And we are engaged internationally in those two languages in the context of culture and business. For all those reasons, I am proud to promote our two official languages with the support of my Parliamentary Secretary, Randy Boissonneau. Today, I would like to talk to you about our official language consultations, which will form the basis of the 2018-2023 Action Plan on Official Languages. But first, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the Annual Report on Official Languages 2014-15, which was tabled in July. It gives an overview of what my department and other federal institutions are doing to promote official languages and to promote the development of minority English and French-speaking communities. It provides information on subjects such as the support of Francophone immigration in places where Francophones are in the minority and support for artists in minority situations. As the report shows, some work has been done, but more work remains. I'm proud to be a part of a government whose members, from coast to coast to coast, value our official languages. I have been working closely with my cabinet colleagues on a variety of issues.
We know that immigration to minority language areas is critical to the future of these communities. And this is why I'm proud to work with my colleague, Minister McCallum, to launch the Programme Mobilité Francophone. I look forward to seeing your committee's report on immigration and to working with you on this important issue. I was also pleased to work with my colleague, the Minister of Defense, Minister Sajjan, to reinstitute training in French at the Royal Military College Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu near Montreal. Most recently, our government honored our commitment to appointing a bilingual judges to the Supreme Court by nominating Justice Malcolm Rowe of Newfoundland and Labrador. It should be a great source of pride for us all to have heard Minister Wilson Rainbow and the former Prime Minister Kim Campbell discuss the increasing interest being shown in the legal community to learn both official languages and the high level of official language competency shown by many Supreme Court's applicants. Under our leadership, we have ensured that the importance of Canada's official languages is placed at the heart of our most important institutions, and we are very proud of it. This is a prime example of both the vision and action for official languages demonstrated by our government, and I will continue to play an important leadership role alongside my colleagues. Nous savons que nous devons relever.
We know there are still challenges, for example, in the areas of community infrastructure, early childhood education, and post-secondary training. This brings me to the Cross-Canada Official Languages Consultations of 2016. They generated a great deal of interest, and I'm very happy about that. We received over 5,000 responses online. By the time the consultations are over, we will have met with almost 350 people in 22 Canadian cities in the most open and roundtable discussions ever. Why do I say they're open and transparent? That's because under the Official Languages Act, as you know, we are obliged to hold public consultations. But we decided not just to hold them on invitation, but also to ask the general public and journalists to attend online, and that's why they were so open and so transparent. To date, 21 meetings have taken place. Several roundtables were broadcast on the internet. Interested journalists also attended the discussions, and I'm very pleased that there was good media coverage in many regions across Canada. We will have 3 additional meetings this month to reach national representative organizations here in the National Capital Region. We wanted to have an open, frank, and useful discussion, and that's what we did. That's what we had.
Coast to coast to coast, including St. John's, Newfoundland, and Labrador, while I was there for the Conférence ministérielle sur la francophonie, as well as in Victoria, BC, and Iqaluit, Nunavut. My parliamentary secretary, Randy Boisson, and I were proud to be joined by various cabinet colleagues across the country, including Minister Bibeau, Minister Goodell, Minister Bryson, Minister Chagger, Minister Herr, and Minister Leblanc. The participants identified important matters of interest, such as the vitality of official languages communities, increasing the rates of bilingualism amongst Canadians of all ages, and bringing Anglophones and Francophones close together. Let me quote some participants. The director of the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network told us, "The language of Canada is French. The language of Canada is English, both of them. And I like to think that I can go to Vancouver and meet Francophones there and that I can speak French with, and vice versa across Canada, and I speak English here." La coprésidente du Dialogue Nouveau-Brunswick a lancé la...
The co-chair of Dialogue New Brunswick said, "We forget we have many things in common. We share a history. We have accomplished things together. How can we get to know each other in such a way that we're not afraid, so that we're able to converse and discuss?" The questions generated a lot of exchange in ideas, and the participants' input will guide us in developing the action plan for official languages. The current roadmap will end on March 31st, 2018. And you know that, of course. Our action plan will be in effect the following day. The support of minority communities in our 2 official languages will continue to guide our actions in keeping with our values. Our official languages are a strength. I hope that all Canadians, whether they are Francophones in Quebec or Anglophones elsewhere in Canada, whether they are Acadians, François, Métis, or people from other linguistic groups, will take an interest in official languages. Together, I would like us to encourage all Canadians to become agents of change, citizens engaged in our great social contract. And official languages, of course, are at the heart of that. I want to continue to work with your committee, of course, and all our government's partners in order to promote English and French across Canada. Thank you. I would now be happy to answer your questions. Thank you, Minister. Without further ado, since we have only an hour together, we'll go immediately to questions and comments from committee members around the table. I'll begin with Ms. Boucher. Good morning, Minister. Good morning to your colleagues, Mr. Lucier, Mr. Gauthier. We're very happy to have this time with you. I've already been the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Official Languages, or responsible for official languages, in the 2006-2007 government. Ms. Werner was the minister at the time, and I'm delighted to see you defending official languages. It's extremely appropriate to say that we've come a long way and we still have a lot of work to do. And we have a committee that works very well as a unit, and I'm delighted with that. Minister, I'll go straight to the heart of the subject. For a number of meetings now, we've been hearing a great many Francophone organizations, particularly those involved in immigration, who say that their funding was being withdrawn and given to Anglophone organizations, which work closely with the settlement of Francophone immigrants. I was very surprised that the funding was being taken away from Francophone organizations and being given to Anglophone organizations when the Francophone organizations in minority communities are already working very hard to help our immigrants settle. Can you assure us, Minister, that this will no longer occur? We're not trying to know what side of the House began withdrawing that funding. This is something we didn't hear much about at the time, perhaps because we had fewer immigrants coming to Canada. But now, with the numbers of immigrants we have today, can we ensure that Francophone organizations will no longer be penalized? Thank you, Sylvie. I appreciate your question. It's a very good one. And it's a subject that I know is extremely important if we are to ensure the survival of our Francophone minority communities, to our linguistic minority communities. It's a subject I've been talking about a great deal with the Minister of Immigration, with Don McCallum. I wanted to ensure we could make some progress in that area. Mr. McCallum and I were involved in bringing over 25,000 Syrian refugees in the space of 2 months. And we saw many requests from organizations which wanted us to ensure that some of those refugees could be integrated into minority language communities. That's why, with my colleagues, we announced that the Avantage Significatif Francophone program would be restored. That's a program that makes it possible outside Quebec to help Francophone immigrants settle with ongoing support. Now, given that we're in the process of preparing the Official Languages Action Plan, it goes without saying that immigration is an issue that we wish to deal with. Well, above and beyond that, I would like an assurance that Francophone organizations will no longer be penalized. What we've been hearing in the past month or two is that organizations that already help Francophone immigrants are losing their funding, and that funding is going to Anglophone organizations doing the same thing. I'd like us to be assured that Francophone organizations and Francophone minority communities will no longer be penalized with their funding going to Anglophone organization. Thank you. I'll just finish my answer because there are two parts to it. The first part was on the program called Avantages significatifs francophones. The second requires cooperation with the provinces. Many decisions are made at the provincial level. There are things we can do there, however. During our First Minister's Francophonie conference in St. John's, our interdepartmental conference in St. John's, I had a chance to discuss the issue. My New Brunswick counterpart, Francine Landry, brought the question up at the Congress on Immigration that was held in Winnipeg a few weeks ago. We want to ensure that we can get the cooperation with the provinces that we need so that funding that targets the integration of Francophone immigrants is appropriately spent by the provinces. I will also be working hand in hand with John McCallum to ensure that we can achieve the 4.4% Francophone immigration target that we haven't achieved for years. And that's a goal that's been expressed many times. We've heard it, but given the lack of investment we saw in the past, we never were able to reach those figures. So we want to ensure that as we establish new immigration threshold, we're actually able to achieve the 4.4 Francophone immigration target. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for being here today once again, because it's your second appearance before this committee, your second meeting with us, and it's an honor for us to have you here this morning. I'd also like to thank you for the consultations that were held this summer. I was delighted to receive the parliamentary secretary, and Mr. Lucier came to my riding to talk about the issues and the vitality of minority communities. Obviously, something that's very important to me and to all Canadians. In the meetings you held, and there have been a number, what have you heard about issues pertaining to the vitality of our Francophone minority communities, and how does the action plan you envisage provide support for the vitality and survival of those communities? Thank you. First of all, it goes without saying that I've already told my team that it's very important for the next action plan to have two pillars. The first is to ensure that the vitality of linguistic communities is supported. We need a more holistic approach, not a silo approach, not an approach where one hand doesn't talk to the other. The second pillar is bilingualism and support for that. The two pillars are not in competition with one another. Both contribute to maintaining social cohesion within Canada and will reaffirm the social contract to which I referred in my comments. Our country has a social contract, and what does it include? Both official languages, a pluralistic society, and reconciliation with Aboriginal peoples. Those pillars that I mentioned are the two that we're going to be enshrining in our new action plan. Both Hubert and Jean-Pierre are working on this. What we heard during the public consultations, four important themes came up. Sylvie referred to immigration, and that's very important because it, again, touches on the long-term survival of the communities. So we want to work with the provinces. I want to ensure that there is leadership on the federal side, but that leadership is conveyed to the provincial side, transposed to the provincial side. We also heard a great deal about community infrastructure, educational infrastructure. We need to ensure there is appropriate funding, increased funding in education. Having visited many cities, I realized how important this was to everyone. We conducted public consultations on official languages, but I went to St. Boniface, Halifax, Whitehorse, not for the public consultations, but for other issues. And I held roundtables with those people in those cities there, and I saw how much funding was needed in infrastructure. With regard to the media, how do we ensure that we have information generated by the communities and that shore up the vitality of Francophone minority communities? There's the digital shift that we have to take into consideration. So another aspect of my work as a minister, which is culture and the media. The media are very important to Francophone minority communities and Anglophone minority communities. Then there's the issue of early childhood education, K-12 and post-secondary as well. Those are the four major themes that people brought up. Regarding community infrastructure, you said that you discussed them in the summer. What were your observations across Canada regarding community infrastructure, particularly in Francophone minority communities? A great deal of investment was poured in the 60s, but those infrastructures need support. What were people's concerns and what was your response? Clearly, when we look at various areas, St. John's, for example, in Newfoundland, the community centre is truly the centre of the community. It's where people come together, where they meet. That's where they work on projects. And that's where you see ideas flourish. And that's where you can experience the vitality of a community. Obviously, upgrades are needed in many places, but we're seeing that minority language communities have a great deal of interest in ensuring that we can track their evolution, as it were. In Iqaluit, in Nunavut, there's a significant Francophone community, as there is in Whitehorse. There are projects underway, expansion projects to help provide the community with interesting spaces for children, for example, and meetings and activities. This means that your child can be happy throughout the school system and will have access to a Francophone structure that is equal in quality and facilities to the educational system available for the majority. That's very important. We are coming to the first generation that follows the Official Languages Act and that has grown up with the policies that were developed under the Act. And that generation is now having children. That generation is now bringing its children into the Francophone communities, into the minority language communities. We are now seeing the results of decisions that were made a long time ago, political decisions. Yes, the issue of infrastructure is absolutely crucial. Mr. Choquette, Minister, thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Gauthier. Thank you, Mr. Lucier. We'll be talking to you soon as well. I have 3 or 4 questions, and I need a really short answer because we have so little time. My first question is very easy. Do you agree with the principle of by and for minority language communities creating programs for themselves, by and for minority communities? I consider it important to work with organizations and to support them as they develop. It's crucial that we have the means to work with the provinces. 1 minute gone, I'm sorry. Well, Mr. Choquette, the question you put requires a complex answer, and as a minister, it's my responsibility to present all aspects of a complex issue. Thank you. We'll go to question 2. With the RCMP, we've had problems recently. A report was published. I put some questions in the House of Commons on the issue. One of the recommendations in the report was that by August 31st, 2016, there should be a monitoring mechanism to ensure that services are available on Parliament Hill at all times. I've never found that assurance in writing. If it exists, could you please convey it to the committee? I had an opportunity to speak to my colleague, the Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, about the RCMP. He's certainly showing leadership. We have a horizontal approach to official languages, and we can see that in many areas we've been able to make a number of advances. It goes without saying that the official languages issue, and I'm very happy with the leadership you're showing on this, Mr. Choquette. The question of official languages has to be reaffirmed all the time. We can always do better. We have to strengthen it all the time. It's unfortunate when federal institutions or groups that are subject to the federal government and to federal authority don't comply with the official languages requirements. So I'm glad that I'm glad you mentioned this. Well, if you do find the monitoring mechanism, please convey to the committee. Now, the Translation Bureau, you've no doubt seen the committee's report. It was a unanimous report. The study and the comments of response. They find that the minister's response was disappointing and the committee's recommendations were not taken up. I know it's not your issue, but Ms. Foots, and she will be coming here too. But what are the recommendations that you believe are important? Which of the recommendations in our report do you consider important? I am very proud of the knowledge and know-how in translation that we have in this country. The federal government played a leadership role in establishing the Translation Bureau. Yes, the Translation Bureau does come under Ms. Foote's authority, and I work very closely with her, but I'd like to ensure that we can preserve that expertise, that knowledge, which exists in French, English, Aboriginal languages. We're going to be developing a new policy in Aboriginal languages, and we have to strengthen the Translation Bureau. I also understand that the Translation Bureau meets 80% of demand, so we have to ensure we have the resources. We need quality interpreters who can achieve a good and satisfactory career with the Translation Bureau. So I have agreed with Ms. Foote that we need to strengthen the Bureau, but we also want to be able to broaden the inventory of services that we can offer through the Translation Bureau in circumstances when there are technological solutions available. And we want to ensure that the Translation Bureau can use those technologies to broaden its service offering. Minister, I have 1 minute left. I know that everything is pertaining to the Translation Bureau is very important to the committee, and we're working on it. Maurice Bélanger and I had brought this up. We worked for months to move ahead with this, and I hope you will speak with Ms. Foote again and ask her whether she would be willing to revise her answer. We'll be happy to receive her here before the committee to see if we can come up with a better response to the report. One last comment. Ms. Foote is an extremely competent minister, and she considers official languages extremely important, so you can rest assured that the Translation Bureau is one of her priorities.
I have 30 seconds, Madam Minister. The official languages report with regard to the Supreme Court judges, have you begun to work on this report? You stated the last time you came that you were very interested in this matter. Have you begun to look at the recommendations? Yes, in fact, not only have I worked on this issue, but I've decided to make it a priority for me in the context of our next meeting with all ministers of Francophonie in Canada. We are going to be looking at this matter together and looking at the accessibility of justice. This is the topic that we will discuss with my counterparts next year, and we will have an inventory of all judges who are bilingual through in our superior courts in Canada. Madame Lapointe, good morning and welcome. I'm very pleased that we're welcoming you here today. In my riding, you know that I have Anglophone language minorities And so what is happening with Anglophones in minority situations, not only in the next roadmap, but also during your consultations? Did you consult minority Anglophones in Quebec when you went throughout Canada? Yes, I had an opportunity to do so. And let me answer you in English on this matter.
I had the chance to have one roundtable myself in Montreal with the different representatives of the Anglophone community. Minister Bibeau was with our parliamentary secretary Randy Boissonneau and on a official languages public consultation in Sherbrooke, and we did have one also in Quebec City. So we had 3 of them in Quebec. And of course, we understand that the needs vary depending on the region, depending on the different groups that are at the table. But for us, it's extremely important to bear in mind that when it comes to official languages, it's about French and English in Quebec, of course, in particular. We also decided to invest money. We gave money to Bishop University in order to increase, actually, to renovate and improve their library. This is an important investment in the community in the Eastern Township. And also, it's important to know that we are in discussion with different groups, including QCGN, and we want to make sure that we can cater to all the needs they have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate for all my Anglophone in my writing. Thank you. So, ma deuxième question.
My second question, and you know, in Deux-Montagnes, we're celebrating Canada's anniversary, and the only place that we're celebrating on July 1st in all the Laurentians. Now, the 150th celebrations are beginning, and we're going to start as of December 31st. How are you going to ensure linguistic duality be reflected in these celebrations for 150 years? Can you share some examples of projects that are going to reflect our own linguistic heritage, French and English? Thank you. And yes, in fact, there are different means that we will be celebrating 150 years. There will be 41 pan-Canadian projects. We're calling them signature projects, which are going to be held throughout the country. Many projects like Rivard, the Grande Traversée, where there's going to be a description of French colonization. There's another project like the Paul Lajoie Foundations and the National Improvisational League, which are going to travel throughout the country for a project called Les Escales de l'Histoire. There are other projects which are community-based, and so they will make sure that these community projects are those that only are in one province. Some announcements have already been made, be it Prince George, they're going to be building a bark canoe. In Edmonton, for example, there is a project called the Flying Canoe Races. And so these are some examples among many. Where I was with the Premier of New Brunswick yesterday, and we talked about that there will be very interesting celebrations on the Fête de l'Acadie on August 15, that there is an Acadian project which is going to include many provinces, PEI, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and of course we ensured that there will be some follow-up with all these signature projects in order to make sure that services be offered in French and in English. A guide has already been prepared by our team, practices guide that will allow us to celebrate not only linguistic duality throughout the country, but at the same time that we comply with the Official Languages Act. It's going to be interesting to see all these celebrations. I hope that in Deux-Montagnes we will be able to implement our two official languages, and we invite you. It would be our pleasure to have you, and I think the citizens would be more than happy to meet you. But also, at this stage of the game, there are other different celebrations happening, and very interesting ones at that. Yes, clearly. You know, listen, I'm going to be very pleased to go to your ridings. I love Charlevoix, and my grandmother lives in De Montagne, in Saint-Eustache. And generally speaking, what we want to do is to make sure, you know, I've talked about this social contract previously. I want to make sure that during these celebrations, that the legacy of the celebrations means that people understand that our two official languages are an integral part of what our country is, and is at the heart, truly, of the values that unite us as citizens of this country. And that's why we have provided interesting amounts of money for these projects. But I hope that each and every one of you will become ambassadors of Canada 150 and ambassadors of linguistic duality in the context of these.
Merci beaucoup. La prochaine intervention va
Thank you. The next will divide our time between Mr. Arsenault and Mr. Vandal. Mr. Arsenault, I only have 3 minutes. So talking about visiting region, but the Restigouche River throughout the Bay of Chaleur is difficult to beat. So I just have 3 minutes. Let me begin, and I'm going to be bouncing around here. Coming back to what Madame Boucher said with regard to the funding not being given to where it should be to encourage immigration, I understand that you are not the Minister of Immigration. What I understood from some witnesses is that on bids to provide services in, that is to say, the majority community is better organized. They say, we're bilingual, we can provide these bilingual services, and it's often toward these majority organizations, which represent majority linguistic communities, where they say, yes, we can provide services to the minorities because we can make our services bilingual. The witnesses told us that it doesn't work. These organizations do not work at the same rhythm as minority communities. And so that means that the witnesses, from what I have understood, is that these services should be provided by and for minority communities. So minority communities and linguistic minorities, that this service should be provided by and for these communities. And what I've understood is happening is that those who have the best tenders, who are the best organized, you know, when they're tendering for services, we're getting the bids. And so how might we ensure that this funding be truly directed to the organizations which answer the needs of the communities and that are on the same wavelength? It's a very good question. And I'm eager to read the report that you have on immigration, because we're going to be looking at it clearly. With regard to development of the action plan, I've already told you about the vitality of linguistic communities. Clearly, when we talk about this vitality, we must refer to the fact that we provide services in all action areas: health, education, early childhood, immigration, economic development, and provide jobs to minority language groups in your own mother tongue. It's a kind of economic development, and it's a type of employment support as well. I'm eager, in fact, to hear about integrating immigration, because this is what you're telling me about. Federally, we have Avantage Initiative Francophone, which promotes immigration and ensure that we have Francophone immigration, but the recommendation we have with regard to integrating and the type of services offered, you know, I'm very interested to look at these matters and study them along with my colleague, Mr. McCallum. We want to ensure as well that in the context of a new immigration series, that we sustain this objective of 4.4% of Francophones, that they be integrated in their mother tongue, and that in minority language communities as well. That's a very important matter. Mr. Vandal, please. I have 3 minutes. Yes. Thank you, Madam Minister. I share your outlook on the importance of Francophone immigration. As a representative of Saint Boniface Saint Vital, Francophone neighborhood in a minority situation. In Manitoba, we are stronger as we welcome immigrants and integrate them than in recruiting immigrants. And so I completely agree that in order to get to the target of 4.4%, we need the buy-in not only of the province but also of the community. However, in Manitoba, there is no money for community groups to help in recruiting immigrants. My question for you is, do you foresee any additional support for community groups, not only in Manitoba, but elsewhere in Canada, so that they may come to the assistance of recruiting Francophone immigrants? You know, this is what I mean by this significant advantage that was launched last summer. And so it was celebrated by many stakeholders in the field, and we want to ensure that we want to give value to the skills, the competencies of the people that we are bringing in, not only their language skills, to allow them to get to this 4.4% of immigration. We think that many ways we can get there. I work very closely with Mr. McCallum on this matter, and I want to tell you that Mr. McCallum is doing an extraordinary work, and he is an ally in this matter for official languages and promoting francophonie in minority language situations. Additionally, this is also a discussion that I will have to have with the government of Manitoba, and that my colleague in immigration must have with his counterparts in the provinces. And that's why I think our approach to official languages is so important. That is to say, we can find allies in all areas, in all departments, that all ministers themselves be responsible themselves for official languages. And, you know, I am convinced that not only, as I said earlier, that my team and I are going to be highly interested and eager to read your report, but that Mr. McCallum's team and Mr. McCallum himself will be interested. Thank you. Bernard Généreux. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Minister, for being here this morning. There seems to be a popularity contest. My whole county is joli in French. It's a pretty county. So, aside from these jokes, Madam Minister, we had a Prime Minister for 9 years who was in government and who began all his speeches in French and English. As a champion of official languages, should you not also be promoting this way of doing and acting by your own Prime Minister? Our Prime Minister is a champion of official languages. In fact, I think we've shown this not only through the matter of appointments to the Supreme Court, not only by ensuring that we have bilingual judges, and I spoke of this earlier, the matter of immigration, the matter also of defense. I'm speaking of him personally, but our Prime Minister is he's a firm promoter, and I'm proud of his leadership on the matter. Madam Minister, in the 2014-2015 roadmap report from 2003 to 2013, there was an increase, despite the restrictions, the budget restrictions, there was an increase in 40% of registrations to language immersion classes throughout the country. So 400,000 students across Canada are in immersion programs. So may we conclude, because of the funding that you're going to be reinvesting or that you consider reinvesting in all francophonie in Canada, or in official languages, if we may term it this way, that we are going to be exceeding these number of enrollments and that you'll have brand new schools throughout the country? Is that what we might conclude? Clearly, we're not responsible for education, as you well know. We're not either responsible as a federal government, which respects provincial competencies, of investments in infrastructure for education. We are there to support some investments. We complement investments, sometimes a school, with a community infrastructure. We can invest in early childhood. We can, in your action plan that you have currently, not only for language infrastructure, clearly since we have been seeing this since the beginning of the study we're undertaking now, that there's a crying lack not only for infrastructure but for early childhood. So often in minority situations, we see all of these components within one building. Are you able to guarantee to us that funding will be promised to minority language regions where new infrastructure will be built? Are you able to give us the figures for that? We have some funding that has been provided on a yearly basis for infrastructure in communities, but I would hope that we could increase this envelope. You know, it goes without saying in my case that every time a family cannot send their child to a school in order to allow the child to become bilingual, well, you know, we are not supporting the social contract which brings us all together. And for this reason, I want to make sure that the provinces decide to prove their leadership in official language matters, because I think that the level of leadership varies from one province to another. And my role in this is to ensure that it becomes a priority. You're quite right. Sorry for cutting you off, Madam Minister, but also accountability changes from one province to another. So funding that has been distributed to provinces, the communities tell us that they've never seen any of this funding. And the whole accountability issue is important because it's great to send money to the provinces. It's great to send money to communities. Even the organizations themselves tell us we would like to be able to be more accountable and better accountable and have access to funding in order to allow us to meet the objectives and the goals of the program, because we can't prove that we have met the criteria of the program in some cases because accountability measures are too vague. Let me conclude on my idea before you come back to this. The idea is that, having said this, what I've witnessed is that not only in Alberta, not only in Ontario, in New Brunswick, there is a new kind of leadership apparent, and I see a reduction in language tensions across the country, especially in Manitoba. The first law or act which recognizes the linguistic rights of the Francophone minority. And so as much as there is a variance in leadership, I see that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and there's better social cohesion. With regard to accountability, which comes back to your second question, you know, I've heard a lot of school boards and school districts have talked about transparency. They've spoken about the federal-provincial agreements. Clearly, this is a matter which we're ready to study in order to ensure that we have the funding that is properly invested. And having said this, I think that inasmuch as I have good allies at the provincial level, this matter might be less important in some. Daryl Sanson. Thank you, and good morning, Madam Minister, and my two colleagues from Canadian Heritage. It's always a pleasure to see you again. I've known you for a long time. And really, you know, I think of the what I said in Yellowknife last week is that we have to go from the actor to the decider stage, and this is what's happening for me today. I'm going to go fairly quickly, Madam Minister, because you made some comments about issues that I would like to come back to and that you might be able to add some further information to. You referred to Yukon and Yellowknife and the fact that they're looking for funding for enlarging their schools because of a higher number of students. We're looking for help for young people and families in order to stimulate these successes across Canada. When I was there, I visited the Yellowknife School, and this explains the difficulty of their request, if I've understood correctly, that the costs are much higher for construction, and because of this fact, the funding that would normally be provided for supporting communities infrastructure-wise does not seem to be the solution, and that we might have to look at this under a different lens, a different strategy for the region. It's the reality for all infrastructure in northern Canada, and it's part, of course, of, how could I say this? It's part of the way we look at projects, not only in Iqaluit or in Yellowknife or in Whitehorse. And so, having said this, I'm looking at projects in all of these three capital cities. My teams in the area are not only aware of this, but they also know that beyond simple words, it's most important to have a project. And what I clearly have said to my teams and to the people I've met in these cities is that instead of talking about it, put a project forward, make a proposal. And this is how we can ensure that we get the investments. We have to act quickly because I know they're waiting for construction, but in the Yukon, the government of the territory wants to start, but your team needs to be able to answer this request very quickly. Okay. And secondly is the issue of immigration. You're looking at a 4.4% goal. Nobody would be happier than I will be when I see that reached. The only thing that I would make a point about is that ensure that it's spread throughout the country, and especially in those rural areas, and not only in the big cities. It's important that way too. Another is daycare, and for daycare, it's probably the most important thing. I know that you have done some good work already, and maybe you could add to this by your comments. You know, if a child goes to English daycare, they're probably going to go to an English school. We have to begin this as soon as possible. I know that you're in discussion with Minister Duclos and Minister Sohi, so families and infrastructure you're talking to. So infrastructure should perhaps come from other departments, and your funding is going to go much further. And so if you look at this lens to look that every time there's infrastructure funding, you'll say, okay, bingo, let's go and look at it for minority groups. Can you add to this by way of your comments? You know, in the first Dion plan, in order to support the vitality of linguistic communities, the whole issue of early childhood education is important. Also in the roadmap recently, Mr. Duclos in his department came up with some funding that had not yet been released with regard to social development. So that was highly welcomed by various organizations. Clearly, though, I invite you to speak to, and I will be talking to Mr. Duclos about the importance of investing in early childhood and also of adding to this lens of official languages, especially when it comes to investing in our big social infrastructure projects. These are discussions that I have with Mr. Duclos, but as an allies of official languages, I invite you to do so as well, because I'm convinced that he's going to be able to prove his own leadership in this matter. Two quick questions, and I'll ask them together so that my chairman doesn't. So the 5% of communities, we've already dealt with this, and we know that the act moved by Chaput for 209 is extremely important that we deal with this quickly, because we're opening and and providing more services. And the second, I've dealt with this issue with Scott Bryson, and I met with Senator Chaput. I appeared before the Senate Committee on Official Languages earlier this week. I was asked many questions about the Senate's bill, and having said this, Mr. Bryson, the chair of the Treasury Board, has already said he's ready to look at regulation in order to facilitate French languages. Congratulations, and because it's important. My last question that I want to slip in there, Mr. Chairman, is the census. We have looked at census issues in the past, but there are 1, 2, or 3 essential questions that did not appear before that need to be integrated in order to properly identify minorities throughout the country. And it's you working with your teams to look at these matters, but there are very specific questions that did not allow us to get the information we needed in order to properly identify bilingual citizens or francophone citizens or francophile. And so it's truly important that we have some input. I'm not sure what the best way of going about this is to deal with this, because if I've understood, you're already dealing now with these matters at the present time. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be able to work on this matter. We make decisions based on the information that we have at hand. And if we're able to gather more information in a better way, then that'll be helping us answer some questions. Immigration, infrastructure, media, education, these are very important and interesting themes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Perhaps a question on my behalf before we conclude. There are many departments that deal with francophones and units, justice, immigration, Treasury Board, official languages. And, do you think that there is a mechanism by which we could coordinate all these departments so that we're all working in the same direction, that this might be useful under a minister such as you, or a means by way there are regular meetings, so that official languages throughout all the government be all working toward the same ends? I think this is the case. I do this with my colleagues. I work very closely with my parliamentary secretary on this matter, and also my officials do the links with other departments, but if you have proposals, I'm always interested in looking at them. Thank you, Madam Minister. Before we end, Madame Boucher asked for the floor for a moment or two. I would like to do something that it is not my habit of doing, since it's usually someone on the other side. We recognize that sometimes people set themselves aside. I would like us to congratulate Maurice Sanson for the prize he was awarded, Edward Galland 2016. He's a champion of official languages, and I think that we must not keep silent that Mr. Maurice Sanson has won an award, and I congratulate you. Congratulations for this award. We're proud of you, and you must be very proud yourself. And I think this award will teach you that you must speak in French much more. So congratulations. Thank you. I very much appreciate this. Thank you. And congratulations on behalf of all in the committee. I need a present now. Madam Minister, thank you so much for your speech and answering our questions. And so we'll suspend our work for a moment or two, and we know that the people who are with you are going to stay with us for the second hour. So we'll take a break for a few minutes.
Nous reprenons.
We will resume the meeting with Mr. Lucier and Mr. Gauthier. I don't think either of you have a presentation to make as such. You'll be answering our questions. So we'll carry on with our Q&A. John Nader. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. I'd like to begin with the question put to the Minister on education.
Anglophone riding, very much English, very little Francophone population. But we're seeing a very high demand for French immersion. In many cases, demand far exceeds the spaces available. We've seen one school board in my riding try to put caps on French language immersion enrollment. I've spoken to some parents over the last week or so about this issue, and their concern very much rests with the fact that there is funding that's provided by the federal government, but that funding doesn't necessarily make its way to French language and French immersion programming. We've seen the Minister of Health suggest that there should be certain rules placed on healthcare funding, and so one of my constituents brought up this particular issue. Why are there not similar strings attached to funding for French language programming in places like Ontario, where we can actually justify and hold accountable the funds that are being provided in communities across the region, that to make sure it actually goes to French language programming. So, what's your thoughts on that?
There's a lot in that question. I'll try to address some of the points. First of all, in terms of the numbers of requests and the capacity of the school system to offer immersion, one of the biggest issues, I'm sure you're aware, is the number of teachers competent available, which creates a bottleneck. Another thing which is worth noting is that the federal support for second language education, be it French or English, in the case of French, will in large part go towards immersion, but there are also other methods of teaching French which are not immersion based, which do not necessarily work as well as immersion, but there's intensive French and there's basic French. So you can't discount these two types that sometimes also benefit from the federal funding. With respect to the French minority school systems, and you've heard a lot about that, we also heard and keep talking with our partners from the Fédération des Conseils Scolaires Francophones, from individual members around the tables of the consultation that the Minister and Monsieur Boissonnault held. It's been a very frequent topic of discussions. We'd like to have discussions in the course of renewing our partnership with provinces, where these issues will be addressed, both from the point of view of better integrating the Conseil scolaire in the discussions we're having with provinces, and from the point of view of the clarity and the quality of the reporting that is done. So it is definitely on our table de travail.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now, I want to go back to the question of Francophone immigration. We know that we're not meeting the 4.4% target. I think it's a laudable target, and frankly, even higher would be better. We heard from immigration officials that 4% was basically maintaining the status quo, not increasing it. From your perspective, from the perspective of official languages, what type of steps ought we be taking beyond what's already in place, beyond the programs that were mentioned by the minister, to get to that 4% target? And what timeline do you think would be realistic to get to that 4% target? Can we do it within a calendar year? We haven't got to it yet, and that's why I'm asking what's the timeline look like from that perspective to get to that 4.4% target?
I think it would be presumptuous for us and a bit outside of our duty to express opinions on how to go about it. But I will say that these issues, both at the level of recruitment and integration, are the object of constant discussions between ourselves and our colleagues in immigration. Madame Joly made reference to, I think, the significant progress that were made in the discussions with the provinces, who are essential partners in that. And not only was there a discussion of Francophone immigration at the last Ministers of Immigration meeting a couple of weeks ago, but there's also a forum which is planned for the spring and March, maybe Jean-Pierre can add to that, which is going to be focused specifically on that very issue with, around the table, federal and provincial officials.
If I can add just a few comments on this. It is well understood by all parties concerned that there's big challenges to be resolved, and nobody has a magic solution. That's one thing to say for starters. It's going to be a challenge, and it's known by everybody, departmental and community organizations and everybody else. There are consultations. Actually, the big day was set up probably like 2 weeks ago by the Immigration Department with the communities, trying to go over all the challenges and try to come up with solutions. And we're waiting to get feedback from our colleagues from Immigration as to what they're going to be putting forward for the next action plan. Indeed, there is a forum that is being developed to put in place at the end of March, where all the ministers from the FPT table on immigration would meet with ministers from the Francophonie table as well, trying to come up with some more solutions and ideas as to how to move forward on this. And as you know, the Conseil de la Fédération, Federation Council, in the summer made a joint declaration that they are aiming for 5% Francophone immigration. So there's a will to make it happen. The how is going to be complicated, but the fact of the matter is that there's discussions going on trying to come up with specific ideas and initiatives.
Thank you. René Arsenault.
Mr. Gauthier, I didn't have time to come back to the Minister with a further question. The Minister talked about upcoming roundtable about access to justice in French. Is there already some sort of outline of what this might look like? What is the goal here? The work for access to justice is being conducted by our colleagues at Justice Canada. For the next action plan, we've already been talking about colleagues in other departments, including Justice, to ask them to think about how we could do this. We'll be looking at existing funding, of course, because there is already money set aside for this in the current roadmap, 93 million over 5 years for access to justice. There are also some innovative ideas coming up to see what we can do better. For judges in the Superior Court and the Court of Appeal and bilingualism there, we're working with the Council of Magistrates. There are training courses that are being provided and supported by the Department of Justice, and they're offered to judges when they accede to their positions. There are courses that have excellent reputations in New Brunswick, where the judiciary can practice a second language. We have to do more with existing initiatives. Some courts are, of course, under provincial jurisdiction. Ontario has done some excellent work at the College of Justice to improve the experience of an accused who is appearing before the court, and that takes into account all staff that surrounds the whole judicial process. That is, of course, much broader, and there is a responsibility for the provinces to improve the interface. It's always a challenge when you have to reconcile the powers of different levels of government, the constitutional obligation to have bilingual judges. There is no such obligation, in fact. We have a government who made a commitment to appoint a bilingual judge to the Supreme Court in 2016. I am a lawyer myself, and I think it's high time that this obligation became something that was applied consistently. I'm glad to hear that there is cooperation among different departments because many are involved. But can we perhaps hope to see that it will be a legal obligation for judges of the Superior Court and the Queen's Bench and the Supreme Court actually be bilingual? That decision is going to have to be made by Cabinet. Is this part of the plan? At present, we're working far more on access to justice measures to improve the experience, to improve the interface of people with the judicial system. So that's what we're focusing on. But we are, of course, fully aware of the bilingual judges issue. The minister was in Newfoundland last month, and that was discussed. Access to justice, there's the accused and the judge. There's the judiciary side and the public. Delivery of justice, the whole judicial machinery has to be able to function in the minority language. Yes, absolutely. There are many, many aspects of the chain, of the continuum, and we have to work on them simultaneously. I'd like to share my time with my colleague as well, if he has questions. The Judicial Challenge Program is a different one. How do you see it within the context of the Access to Justice initiative? Is this something that you're looking at as well in relationship to minority communities? The Legal Challenge Program is something we're trying to set up. There was always a linguistic rights component, and we're bringing the program back to its original intent, in fact. There is work being done in this area, and the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Canadian Heritage will be making announcements in that regard. It will make it easier to develop case law. It will, through funding for the costs of litigation, improve access. Now, it remains to be seen whether the program will broaden access more broadly for specific cases that move the rule of law forward. We are conducting consultations to produce legal opinions. This is the kind of issue that's going to be considered, and there will be an announcement in the near future. Thank you. If I may add something. The Court Challenge Program is under Canadian Heritage, not the Department of Justice. But we work very closely with our friends from Justice in delivering the program. Thank you, Mr. Choquette. Thank you again for being here today. When the minister said that in applying the by and for principle, the provinces had to be consulted, we're talking about federal programs that are open to working with organizations. So why could she not apply the by and for principle? Well, there are a number of cases in point, if I could say. There are some programs that are exclusively under federal jurisdiction. There are some programs that are delivered by the provinces with federal support. They deliver particular services. The Bound 4 issue has come up in immigration, and it's also come up in employment support. It's a broad and complicated issue. So if we take your programs as an example, you are running the bids, the bidding system, and you can certainly state in those bids, nothing prevents you from saying that that the programs or services are to be delivered by official language communities. I'm getting to know these issues now because I've been here a while, but there's still one issue I can't understand, the roadmap. I'm looking at the financial side of it now. Is this an enhancement of the official languages program, or is this just essentially moving money around and the roadmap is a showcase? I don't get it. What exactly is the roadmap? I can understand that it's a little difficult to follow. The roadmap at present, the current roadmap essentially is a presentation of increased funding that was increased in the early years of 2000 and which has been maintained, often through programs which in the past 10 or so years have been amended, improved, changed. The funds in the roadmap are funds that were already in place. They existed before the roadmap and which have been maintained by the government, which brought them together into a roadmap. So the roadmap was never really an increase in funding. If I look at 2003, 2004, if we look at the total amounts in the regular budget and then in the roadmap budget, we even see that there was a 3.07% reduction in the budget compared to the preceding year. So the roadmap is more of a showcase than an enhancement of funding. One point on those figures, in the second roadmap, the third official languages plan, as it were, some funding was removed, but that funding was associated with program administration. Exactly. On that point, on program administration, the 2013-2018 roadmap, I'm talking about the Plan Dion, the roadmap, whatever it may be called. There were management plans, as it were, management plans that made it possible for us to follow the funding and track accountability. In 2018, we're looking for that framework, that management framework. And we're almost in 2017. We're almost at the end of the current roadmap, but we still don't see a management framework. I'm looking at the files. The researchers has done some excellent work. At 2011-12, when we look at the regular budgets, there's a certain amount, but when we look at the amounts that are specifically allocated to the roadmap, it's impossible to see. So since 2011-12, I don't see any figures showing what additional enhancement strategy or strategic enhancement the roadmap brought. So it looks like nothing more than a showcase. I may be able to clarify something. The framework does exist. Unlike the first and second roadmaps, the framework in the first framework, in the first roadmap, the management framework was produced as a different document. In the second one, the framework was part of the presentation to Treasury Board. That's where the assessment and accountability procedures are set out. Please forgive me, Mr. Gauthier, I don't have much time, but for the committee's sake, could you please send this management framework to the committee? It's a cabinet confidence document, and that's why it wasn't published. Well, how can we as members look at the accountability side of it if that framework isn't public? For accountability, and this applies to all roadmaps, you have the table which is in the departmental performance reports, which for each initiative shows the expenditure. Well, DPRs aren't detailed enough. It does. It shows all spending by initiative, but the management framework makes it possible to see whether the DPR in fact aligns with the original plan. The framework establishes mechanisms, but the mechanisms, once there, are accessible. Accountability, annual financial accountability reports are there, and in the annual report we incorporate accountability and reports on roadmap spending. If you look, there are a number of passages where we talk about initiatives that are provided through the roadmap. So the accountability and reporting is there. But please understand, I'm sorry, it seems I'm out of time. Mr. Choquette, please. We're out of time. Mr. Lefebvre, thank you. In the speech, or her statement rather, the minister explained that official languages provide opportunities for families to receive services in French, and the Official Languages Act introduced a whole generation of people who grew up under the Official Languages Act. My parents didn't have any access to secondary education in French, and since the federal government supported provinces in their provision of secondary minority language education, I could go to school in French. I even went to university and studied law in French. That's thanks to the federal government's support for the provinces. One of the issues I see now is early childhood education. The minister spoke to us about that. My godson, my sister-in-law, was looking for daycare in French in the Sudbury region and couldn't find one. Not when she needed it, anyway. My nephew, therefore, went to an English daycare, and they are an exogamous couple. We heard many witnesses in recent weeks talking about early childhood and the issues associated with it. Even though early childhood is under provincial jurisdiction, I know that in the Commissioner's report there are recommendations on it. The federal government can provide support and work with the provinces on early childhood, but in practical terms, the new action plan states that early childhood will be a priority. How do you see the role of Canadian heritage and official languages in supporting the new program? There are many ways in which such support could be provided. First of all, I'll speak for Canadian heritage because that's the department we represent. On the infrastructure side, we can support the provinces when they build daycares and schools, and that's what we've done in some cases. Mr. Sanson, no doubt, will remember, because in Nova Scotia there have been some excellent examples of this. In some provinces, we've done it less because the policy was taken over by the Department of Education, the Provincial Ministry of Education. They were responsible for providing equipment for early childhood. The minister talked about early childhood. Yes, there are many infrastructure issues associated with that. It's been raised at every round table during the consultations.
We can speak about Mr. Duclos and his initiative for early childhood education, which not only deals with matters of infrastructure, but of training and capacity, professionals. And so there is some thinking underway, because $700 million was announced in the last budget, some initiatives for early childhood education throughout the country. If I may have another example, in Western Canada, there are wait times for parents who want to enroll their children, who come out and wait in line 24 hours ahead of time because they know that the place for their child in a kindergarten or an immersion will never be available to them. They will only be educated in English, and that's all they have an opportunity for. And so how is it that the action plan might be able to support provinces with regard to immersion schools and offer more places in these schools? It's not an issue of demand. It's a supply and demand matter. It's a supply that's missing, not any demand. Quite right. And a priority issue that we certainly will be acting on is teacher training. This is one of the major obstacles, that is the supply, not only the number of teachers, but some would say the quality of teachers available is an issue for immersion schools. What I wanted to add is that these are comments that we heard often during the consultations that we held during the summer. In fact, we have the same reading of the situation, a great deal of demand, not so much supply, sometimes because of the training or of teachers or early childhood education teachers. These are issues that are going to be a part of our thinking in the next couple of months and options to provide to the Minister and the Cabinet. The Minister has already identified, as she heard over the course of these consultations, the things that we are going to make priority matters. We are looking at the opportunities there. We're going to hear often about capacity building. And in 2016, we are looking at building capacity, and even in some regions, in a minority situation, in Sudbury, you know, whether you like it or not, we're fine with regard to education. Early childhood, there are some difficulties, but throughout the country, it's a matter. And we call ourselves a bilingual country. We're in 2016 now, and I think it should be a priority to come back to these, especially with regard to the 150th celebrations. The action plan must reflect these. It's essential for us to be talking about these matters and to ensure the sustainability of language training throughout the country. Thank you. Mr. Robert. Yes. I'm sorry, Mr. Vandal. We know the Minister has just told us that one of the priorities through her consultations is the issue of media. And in 2010, the support for printing was replaced by a magazine fund. And if I have properly understood, there is no recognition of the publishing Francophone material in minority situations. Am I correct in saying that? In fact, there are provisions in the new program which make it easier for minority media to be qualified. The threshold is lower for eligibility in these cases. This consideration was clear as we established a new program. Minority media, but that's not Francophones in minority situations. Oh, it's the same thing? So how did it change then? I might be able to give you some examples. So magazines that are qualified have to sell 5,000 subscriptions, and so this has now been reduced to 2,500 subscriptions for minority publications. Generally, they have to have sold 50% of the issues, and this requirement has been eliminated for magazines in minority language situations. There is a minimum subscription price of $12 for magazines, generally speaking. This now has been brought down to $1 for media in minority language communities. So this makes access easier to the providing publications in language minority situations. The net result, because that's what counts at the end of it all, is that most of the minority publications have seen an increase over what they've gotten. But this is not true in all cases. There are 3 or 4 cases where the opposite happened. And this is what is raising a lot of questions, a lot of reaction. And these are the kinds of issues we're thinking about. How do we manage these situations? In the Manitoba situation, Le Bétail came down by 50%. Yes, that was one that was not favored in this case. La Vie in Saskatchewan, Express in Ottawa can no longer publish, if I've understood correctly. Am I right? Well, I'm not aware of all specific. Liberté, I know. Express Ottawa, I'm not clear about their particular situation. We know that we don't manage this program. You must remember that as well. But there are 3 or 4 publications which are on this dashboard we're looking at that were less favored by the changes. On a case-by-case basis, we'll have to look at what's happening. Do you foresee any changes to the FCP in order to validate, align the objectives and to help people in minority language situations? Those who are managing the program have it assessed every 5 years, and that is their opportunity to look at the relevance of the criteria that exist at this current time. On a case-by-case basis, it's a responsibility that they have during the assessment. It's part of the regular life cycle. And we can look at see if there are any changes. Is it your department or another one that no, it's Canadian Heritage, but it's another branch within? Yes, they are colleagues within Heritage, Canadian Heritage. Thank you. Madame Boucher. Good morning, Mr. Luthier, Mr. Gauthier. It's an interesting discussion. We've talked of many things today. We've discussed the action plan. We've also talked about the roadmap, 2013-2018. And I'm still very surprised to see that we have heard very little, if at all, about education and early childhood education, immigration, but very little about health. However, in the 2013-2018 roadmap and even previously, French language healthcare was a winner, if I may express it in this fashion. In healthcare, programs were consistent over the last several years and will be in the long term thanks to the financial support of the roadmap. It's important for healthcare that the roadmap be renewed, because even if this is a provincial responsibility, linguistic duality is a federal responsibility. And so, according to what you know, is health going to be part of the new action plan? Because for me, it's an important issue. I'm a Francophone above and beyond anything else. I get by in English, but I've always said that when you're sick or when you had a problem, you had a problem in your mother tongue. We've done a great deal of progress thanks to the roadmap. Now there's going to be an action plan. Can you tell us, in a couple of words, what success the roadmaps have had? And with regard to these successes, will you foresee having more success in the future with the action plan? It was an issue of health around the consultation tables, in fact, and we can say without boasting about it that we've had some great success in this field and successes that we have seen. But there are 2 main components. There's one, the education and training of healthcare professionals. And if I looked at the figures which are in my book here, I would quote them for you. 106 million over 5 years. But the number of professionals who have been educated, there are thousands of them since the beginning of the action plan. There are not only physicians who are trained in minority language institutions and then who go on to serve minority language communities. Pardon me, you should listen to this. So EMTs, nurses, physicians, ambulance attendants, all kinds of people. And so these are the first components, and the second are healthcare networks. 2,400 professionals trained since 2013. And to give you an example of all of this, we're talking about francophones outside Quebec and anglophones inside Quebec. The network, Société Santé en Français, these networks work alongside with provinces and with local organizations to develop services. They do not provide services. However, they help the development of these services in partnership with provincial organizations. So services in minority language, and much success has been had. And what will be the place of health in the future plan? Well, these successes must be sustained. Thank you very much. Do I have some time left? We talked a lot about immigration as well. I know that immigration in some provinces like Quebec, that's in part 2, but what we've noticed is that the 4.4% that we've given ourselves as a target is difficult to establish or to attain, because in communities outside of Quebec, one could say that there's a great deal of difficulty with regard to retention. Have you any solutions to put forward to retain Francophones? Is this going to be part of the action plan? You're right to say that the bar is high, and my colleague Jean-Pierre talked about this earlier, to get to that 4.4% goal. Previously, we have heard that there is a lack with regard to orienting Francophone immigrants once they get to Canada. And the capacity of the community and school network is an issue of going to get them early enough in their integration process in order to allow children to get to the schools, to use French language services, and that they become integrated into the French language community. Some fall through the cracks. And so this is some of the things that our immigration colleagues are looking at, along with provinces, and we ourselves are looking at improving the network's capacity, either at a community or a school network, to immediately communicate with these people and to send them toward existing services rather than to seeing them be sent toward English language institutions. May I add that with regard to immigration, we're talking about intake and retention in minority situations. There are challenges and some thinking to be done about recruitment overseas, and then the communities which do the recruitment. This is done through our embassies in Paris and in Northern Africa. Thank you. Madame Lapointe and Mr. Sanson are going to share their time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being with us. Madame Boucher, we were preparing for our question. It's not that we were not listening to it. Health is an important matter in the language of our choice. Please know that. Our report was prepared in 2015. You must be aware of this immigration for communities in minority language groups. You were there at the time, so there were 2 recommendations. May I read them to you, please? Citizenship and immigration promote the opportunity to live and work in French language communities and minority situations. Recommendation 1. Recommendation 2, that Citizenship and Immigration Canada look at options to increase the number of Francophone immigrants who go to minority language communities in Canada through the Express Entry program. In your opinion, should Citizenship and Immigration Canada, or have they retained and implemented these 2 recommendations? Clearly, I know that for a fact that our colleagues are aware of the report. Yes, because we haven't attained the 4.4% goal of Francophone immigration. I have a clarification, but I don't know if it changes much. But it's 2023 for our goal. But it's a challenge, the 4.4%. Yes, they're looking and working on these 2 things, at promotion overseas and establishment here. Clearly, it was part of the discussions that they had during their consultations 2 or 3 weeks ago with community groups in order to look at what could be done. It's also part of the discussions that were held at an intergovernmental level with provinces and territories to see with partner provinces how to find solutions and to attain these objectives. Clearly, our colleagues have very clearly heard the recommendations of the community, and they're part of these solutions as well. I have a minute left. We talked about early childhood a moment ago and immersion programs. immersion and not having an opportunity to get access to a school, I think that's horrible. But for early childhood purposes, this is where you start using your language. And if you look at Francophone teachers in Quebec, many of them have teachers who are coming out of Francophone universities in Quebec who would surely be interested in working in Western Canada. I would like to hear what you have to say about that. You know, it is a fact that many of them are educated in Quebec and they teach outside their province. There is a program called a Second Language Monitor Program, which allows students, often Quebec students, go and study outside of their home province, and they are supported to do so in order to support themselves, teachers in French language schools.
Ms. Lapointe, I'll finish on that. My eldest child finished studying education last year at the University of Montreal. So I think it's a good opportunity to provide teachers coming out of French language university these opportunities, particularly early on in their careers. They're more mobile than they will be once they have families. Just a suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Sanson. Thank you to my dear colleague. 3 or 4 minutes isn't very long for detailed questions. The French test relating to immigration that we've heard about, it's more expensive, it's very difficult, it's complex, and so on. Is it possible that your department could take that on and manage it, simplify the test? The test is an integral part of the immigration process. It makes it possible to qualify immigrants, and it should remain with the department responsible for immigration. They've invested a great deal in establishing those tests to give immigrants language qualifications. They've also followed criticism on the cost of the tests very closely this summer, and they're looking at the issue to see how they can come up with measures that will make it more satisfactory for people. Mr. Lucier. Just to remind you that these tests are administered by organizations that are outside organizations certified by Immigration Canada, and they administer the tests under contract. Yes, but according to the minister, you have such a good relationship with Immigration Canada on immigration. There might be an opening here to bring some influence to bear. In your consultation rounds, did you hear, well, did the priorities expressed by the minority communities you visited, are those priorities often those shared by the department? I would say yes. Circumstances in various communities are fairly well known. What's important and valuable with the roundtables is that we hear the people experiencing those circumstances, talking about them. Often we're far from the region, so they give us an opportunity to be there and to establish a ranking of significance of those issues to the communities in question. It's very valuable for us to hear people speak and to see how particular circumstances are experienced in their regions and what sort of challenge that represents and what their priorities are. If I might add, to the consultations, we invite not only members of the minority communities, but also Canadians of the majority, so to speak, community. So there's an interesting dialogue that often takes place between the minority and the majority. Quite often, the majority are either Francophiles or Franco-curious, as Mr. Boissonneau likes to say. And that really is a very rich exchange. They're willing to cooperate, and each essentially strengthens the other in helping them to achieve their goals. But those priorities aren't necessarily those reflected in the government's priorities. Thank you, Mr. Sanson. Mr. Généreux. Thank you. I will give my time to Mr. Sanson. No, not really, just joking. Oh, how generous Mr. Généreux is. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Mr. Lucier, off the record, you said that there had been cuts. Communities are very interested in the by and for principle, and they want more funding so that they can provide more services. That doesn't necessarily go against what's being done now, but I would imagine that the discussions you're having in the department and departments hinge on whether it's possible to give people more funding so they can provide more services. What are the differences between those two potential approaches, the ones the communities would like and the one the department would like? The communities want more money to provide more services. Well, here's what I'll say on that. Having services delivered by the community is something that happens a great deal in the official languages, in the area of official languages. It's not universal. There have been initiatives and calls for tenders where all those interested in delivering services could bid, and in some cases, departments asked groups who had the bilingual capacity to do it to offer services to the minority community. Health Canada, for example, Skills and Development Canada, and immigration as well. In some cases, they're specific cases, so we shouldn't generalize, but often it's the minority that has the mandate to provide services to their community. It's not a principle. It's simply how it's worked out. There has been discussion. We have interdepartmental committees where we share our experiences on this sort of thing and where we discuss the by and for principle. We are sensitive to the issue and we think about it. More resources? Well, at the present time, and that brings us back to the roadmap, the amount in the budget is an actual amount. Those resources are provided each year. That funding is provided each year, and there isn't any capacity, generally speaking, to provide more funding. Yes, for some areas and departments, but we are using at present the available resources to the full, and we have what we need to provide the services we do. Departments can sometimes reallocate funding as priorities shift. That is a part of program management. How do you explain the very important, or significant, I should say, the very significant rise in registration into second language education in Canada? To me, it's a very positive sign. It's great that English Canadians want to learn French, but the system's saturated. My sister-in-law, for example, she stood in line for 36 hours in front of a Toronto school to register her children. Yes, it's unique in the planet where a majority population is so keen on the minority language that it really wants its children to learn it. Should we provide more resources so that more children can learn French? You're quite right. There's a huge appetite for it, and it isn't being fully met. We know that many school boards feel they cannot meet demand. Hubert was talking about it a short while ago. The capacity for recruiting teachers, and that comes back to what we were saying on mobility. There aren't enough teachers to teach in immersion. Finding them is a huge challenge, and that's part of our discussions with the provinces and territories when we fund second language education. It's a huge challenge. There certainly must be pools of potential teachers in Quebec. Yes, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Choquette. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 3 minutes, I believe. Yes. Okay. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for being here. I cut you off a bit earlier because we had so little time, and I apologize for that. But there is only limited time, and we want to get to the bottom of things. Certainly, we won't get to the bottom of issues like the management framework we spoke about earlier. You explained why that won't be possible. I asked the chairman whether you might be able to organize a meeting, as you sometimes do, to make a presentation to us on the management framework so that we can better understand how the accountability mechanism works. You said that there is a framework for the 1318 roadmap. As members of Parliament, members of this committee, we have to understand it, and I realize that in 2 minutes you can't really explain it in detail. Could you possibly organize a meeting to help the entire committee? It would provide us with a better, clearer perspective on the study of the roadmap we're engaged in at present. Thank you. The other topic I'd like to talk to you on. A little earlier, we spoke about whether the roadmap was an enhancement of existing programs or pre-existing programs or a showcase. Should we think about that aspect before the next plan, an action plan, rather than a roadmap is established? In your departmental reflections, there's the old official languages plan, there's the roadmap, there's also everything that departments do and that touch on official languages. Immigration, for example, they do a lot. The Justice Canada, we mentioned that as well today, and the work that you're doing for access to justice and your cooperation with the provinces. Do you believe that it is easy for a member of Parliament to find out what is being done on official languages by each individual department? Can we have access to that information? How much money, how many FTPs are working on official languages across the machinery of government, all departments? Accountability is important, reporting is important, governance. I don't know who asked a question on governance. I think it was René Arsenault. We need to know who, at the end of the day, has oversight on what's happening. That's a huge question. Anything that flows from the roadmap and reporting pertaining to that exists, and anyone, members of Parliament, any member of Parliament can find out what's being spent. It might be made easier to find, perhaps, but it is available. I would add something I consider important. When it comes to official languages, many aspects of it come under the roadmap, but there are many other aspects that go beyond what is in the roadmap, like the CBC, for example, cultural institutions such as the National Film Board, Telefilm Canada. They do a great deal to connect the two cultures of this country and to support cultural production within Francophone and Anglophone minority communities. These institutions don't highlight their achievements enough, perhaps, but they are still quite fundamental to achieving official language objectives in this country. Thank you, Mr. Lussier, Mr. Gauthier. Thank you for your presentations and for answering our questions. This brings our meeting to an end today. I know that Ms. Boucher wanted to talk about future business. I'd like to tell committee members that next Thursday we have set aside 1 hour to talk about the committee's work. So we will discuss future business on Thursday. Until then, next meeting, I should say. We are therefore adjourned. I have received the French test. I've received it. Do you all have it? I'm sorry, I have a meeting at 11 in another building. Ms. Boucher will try to set aside time at the next meeting, but today we do have to adjourn now. We are adjourned until next Tuesday morning. Thank you.